Number 1. Night Alone. When I was 14, my parents left me home alone one night. They were going to a party that was just for adults, and would be gone for quite a long time. I had already been staying home by myself without a babysitter for a while, so this was nothing unusual. The other choice would have been to go over to my grandparents' house, but I really didn't want to do that. They left rather early, and I knew that they would be home really late. That didn't bother me, as it likely wouldn't bother any teenager. I was getting the whole house to myself for a while. The thing I remember most about that day was how windy it was. It began when I was at school. The wind had begun picking up and howling throughout the day. By the time I had gotten off of school and was on my way home, it had to be close to 20 miles per hour. It was difficult as hell trying to walk home in it, but once I got home, everything was fine. About an hour after my parents had left, I heard our doorbell ringing. I went downstairs to answer the door. I opened it up and there was a strange man that I didn't know standing at the door. "Hey, can I speak to your parents?" he asked me, smiling. "My mom's indisposed of at the moment," I responded. You know, when I was 14, I thought that sounded like the most clever thing I could tell the guy. I thought it sounded convincing, but I think we all know that it wasn't. "Well, is your dad home?" he asked. "I'm selling these discount books for a restaurant downtown, and would need to speak to an adult about them." I told the guy my dad was at work and would be there late. Yeah, looking back, another mistake. At work, but leaving off "would be there late" would have been a much better choice. The man thanked me and left. I closed the door and locked it, and then went back upstairs to watch television in my bedroom. I'm not sure how long I lay there on the bed, watching TV. I was also listening to the sound of the wind outside. There is something I really enjoy about that. Some people like rainy days or snowy days. I have always liked windy days. I heard a crash outside. Getting up, I ran to the side window and looked out it. It was already dark, but it looked like it was one of our garbage cans that got knocked over by the wind. Although it had startled me at first, this wasn't unusual on a windy day. I decided I would wait for the commercial, and then I would go pick the can up. As I was watching my TV show, I kept hearing a lot more noises as the wind kept blowing things around. I kept telling myself that the garbage can could wait, but the more noise I heard, the more I realized what kind of mess would be waiting for me if I waited much longer. So I gathered myself up and was prepared to go and clean up the garbage can. I walked out of my bedroom and down the hallway. I made it down 3 stairs before I stopped. One of the lights downstairs was on. That wasn't enough to make me stop, though, as it was very possible that I had left it on. But nothing I could have done could have accounted for the shadow that I saw moving on the opposite wall. Someone was in our home. I waited for a moment, trying to determine if I had made enough noise to be noticed. But whatever the person was doing, they were not coming towards the stairs. I decided that whatever noises I had been making must have been covered up by the noise of the wind. So I very slowly began to walk backwards up the stairs, and once I got to the top, I crept back into my bedroom and quietly closed and locked the door. I went to my closet because I figured that in addition to the wind, that would further muffle the sound. I then called the police and let them know some intruder was in my house. It was a nightmare waiting for them to show up. It probably seemed much longer to me than it actually was, but I simply remained in the closet. The wind was still making noise, and I was at times unsure whether the noise was coming from the house or from the wind. With how loud the wind was, the guy could have probably made it all the way up the stairs without my knowing it. However, the police arrived and apprehended him before he had any chance of coming to get me. Not that, in retrospect, do I think he had any intention of getting me. I think he thought that the noise from the wind was enough to mask his break-in. And it would have been, too, if it hadn't been for that garbage can being knocked over. Oh, and yeah, it was the supposed salesman from earlier. When you're young and home alone, be careful who you let know you're home alone. Number 2. Drive home. I've only had one really scary experience that I can remember, and there is no way that I can really understand or explain what happened. This happened when I was in college. It was the beginning of the winter break, and I was driving back to my parents' house for the holidays. It was quite a drive, too. I had a really old Mustang LX that I had fixed up. Although my car was really shabby looking, it was extremely reliable, and it would take me through the many states that it took me to get home. Now, the only issue I had with driving home was that I was one of those people who would keep driving to see how far I could get. And when I did that, I would often get so very tired that it was dangerous to drive. But I had money for a motel each night. On the second day, I was driving through the mountains. This was a while back, before everyone had smartphones and the ability to check the weather all the time. It was an extremely windy day, and that of course made driving much more difficult. But I was determined to still make good time, so I kept driving well into the night without making many stops. By the time I was finally tired, I was unable to find a motel. When I finally came across a sign that told me where the next motel was, I think I recall that it was at least 70 miles away, and my eyes were already beginning to close on their own. There was no way that I would be able to make it the entire way. Eventually, although I knew it wasn't a safe thing to do, I had to pull my car off the side of the road and try to get some sleep in the car. I had done it before, a few times, when I had been out drinking, So, I knew that I would be able to get some rest, get back up and get on my way. The only thing that I was worried about was a car driving by that night, and the wind being too rough for them too. I would hate to be hit like that. But that was a chance I had to take, or I might have fallen asleep at the wheel myself. I pulled the car over and climbed into the back seat. I want to explain what it was like being in the car, in that weather. It was rough. The wind was constantly shaking the car, and every now and then there would be a really strong burst of wind that would really rock the car hard as it howled throughout the mountains. I was fortunate that I liked that sort of weather, so I was able to rest through it. It didn't take long for me to fall asleep, but the wind did cause me to wake up every now and then, but it was easy to fall back asleep. One of the times that I woke up, it felt a little different for some reason. I guess it's hard to explain if you weren't there, but if you have ever been asleep in a car when it's windy outside, you might know what I mean. I didn't feel like it was the shaking of the car that woke me up. It seemed like something else. Now, keep in mind how exhausted I was. I looked around the windows of the car, trying to wipe the blurriness out of my eyes, and by the time I did, I noticed something that I could not explain. On the window, by where my feet were, which was facing the road, there was something tapping on my window. It looked like a finger, but I wasn't sure. But it was tapping over and over on the window. At first I didn't do anything. I was too scared to move. I don't really believe in cryptids or anything of that nature. My thought was that it was probably a person. Although what person and why that person would be doing such a thing I did not know. As I lay there, I wondered what to do. I looked around the car to see if I could find anything to use as a weapon. There was a tire cross under the passenger seat of the car. I knew that would have to do if I needed it. I just watched the finger, or whatever it was, tapping on my window. I looked over at the locks, and they were locked. So all I did was close my eyes and keep the blanket over my head. I had the tire iron with me, and if someone or something broke into my car, I would have the element of surprise. Occasionally, my car would rock back and forth. I was never sure if it was because the wind or if something was rocking it, but the break-in never happened. And eventually, when I began looking out, I didn't see the finger or anything. I carefully scooted myself quietly into the front seat of the car. I was expecting to see someone or something as I quickly started the car and hit the gas. I then expected to see someone standing behind the car as I drove away, but there was nothing. I just drove and drove until I was able to find a motel, and when I did, I got myself a room. I slept like crap though, wondering all the time what had happened to me out on that road. Number 3. Boat. The worst thing to ever happen to me happened to me due to my pure stupidity. Hell, I'm not afraid to admit that. I can take responsibility for the bad things I have done. This happened in the very late fall in Lake Michigan. My friend Todd and I decided that we were going to take our boat out on the lake. We shouldn't have. It was way late in the year to do it, and it was pretty windy that day. But we decided that it would be just adventurous for us, and we went out to do it. We knew it was going to be super windy. Like I mentioned, that was the point. But once we were out and far enough from shore, the wind simply picked up more and more. It got much worse than either of us had expected. Due to the ferocity of the wind, we decided that we needed to get the boat to shore as quickly as possible, so we headed in that direction. But the wind was strong, and the boat was small, and there were times when I didn't think we would make it. Well, Todd took the wheel, and I went under the deck to get some jackets for us. It was getting cold outside, and I thought it would help us against the wind. While I was down there, I found enough gear for us to try and keep warm. But when I came back up again, Todd was no longer at the wheel. I looked around on deck, and I didn't see him anywhere. I called out his name in panic, and tried to tell him that if he was playing a joke on me, this wasn't the time. But he wasn't there. He was not on the boat. Quickly, I began scanning the lake around the boat. I thought it was possible that he got hit by a gust of wind and was knocked overboard, but I couldn't find him. I stopped the boat, turned it around to search back the area that we had traveled over, looking for him in the water. I called out for him. He had a life jacket on, so I hoped that I would have been able to find him. I searched and I searched, but there was nothing. There was no sign of him. There was no life jacket. There was no body. There was nothing. He was simply gone. I didn't want to go back to shore at that time. I wanted to keep searching for him, and I did. I kept looking, going over and over, around and around, trying to find my friend. Hell, I ended up in places that we hadn't traveled in, thinking the wind and current may have taken him away. For hours and hours I searched, and I was not able to find him. Eventually I had to give up. I had to report what happened. He was never found though. But as huge as the lake is, it has to be easy for someone to disappear on it. I can't tell you how it feels to not only lose your friend in the middle of a huge lake and to be responsible for it, with a feeling of utter defeat when I realized I would never find him and had to give up the search. To this day, I am terrified of both the water and the wind. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell below, or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. But most importantly, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.